The sign on the glass read closed, though the lights were still on. Inside, the air smelled faintly of oil and old paper. Dozens of clocks lined the walls, grandfather clocks, pocket watches, cuckoos and wristwatches, each ticking at its own pace, like a room full of people whispering over one another. Ellis Dade sat behind the counter, elbows resting on a green felt mat, peering through a loop at a watch face the size of a quarter. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows, exposing forearms marked by fine scratches and burnished skin, a record of years working with metal and patience. He wasn't fixing the watch so much as listening to it, holding it near his ear, brow furrowed, as if waiting for it to confess something. It didn't. He exhaled and set the watch down gently among a half-circle of tiny screwdrivers and open casings. Across the room, the chorus of misaligned clocks clicked and tocked, none in unison, none except one. Near the doorway that led to the back room hung a small silver pocket watch, mounted in a brass frame. Unlike the others, it ticked precisely, quietly, steadily, as if indifferent to the chaos around it. Every morning, Ellis wound that one first. He never adjusted it. He didn't have to. At 38, he looked older. His dark hair curled slightly at the temples, and the lines around his eyes had settled in, though they hadn't yet hardened him. He wore a grey flannel shirt and jeans, with frayed cuffs, as if he hadn't quite unpacked from whatever life he'd left behind. He moved slowly, not with fatigue, but in tension. Like someone who'd once lived too fast, and now didn't trust speed. Outside, the street was empty, the kind of stillness you only find in small towns after 9 p.m., where even the gas station dims its lights early. The only movement was the faint flicker of a faulty neon sign 3 doors down, stuttering a pink glow that didn't quite reach the sidewalk. Ellis stood and stretched, bones cracking softly. He walked to the front window and flipped the sign to open, though no one was out there to see it. He did this every night, just for a few minutes, like a habit kept long after its meaning was lost. Then he returned to the counter, turned, the dial on the old radio behind him, and let the static settle on an old jazz station. The melody was grainy, as if played from underwater. He didn't seem to mind. From a shelf beneath the counter, he pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. Inside, names and dates were scribbled in tight, even handwriting. Most of them were crossed out. Customers from years ago, repairs completed, promises kept. He turned to the last page. It was blank. Ellis stared at it for a long time. Somewhere deep in the room, a cuckoo bird popped out too early. Another chimed too late. The silver watch by the kitchen door ticked on, steady, unbothered. He stood there, quiet, letting the sounds fill the space that used to be conversation. The door was locked. No one had knocked, and yet he found himself glancing at the clock. It was 3:07 a.m. The knock was too soft for the hour. At first, Ellis thought he imagined it. A creak in the rafters, maybe, or one of the clocks misbehaving again. But then it came again. 3 quick taps, like someone unsure whether they should be knocking at all. He moved toward the door slowly. No one should be outside at this hour, especially not in this town. He hesitated before unlocking the bolt. Through the glass, barely visible under the overhead streetlight, stood a boy, maybe 8 years old, maybe smaller because of the oversized coat hanging from his shoulders like it belonged to someone else. The boy didn't look scared, just waiting, still. As if time weren't moving for him at all, Ellis cracked the door. "Are you lost?" The boy shook his head once, then pulled something from the coat pocket and held it out. His hand was small, fingers raw red from the cold. Resting on his palm was a broken pocket watch, its glass cracked, the hands frozen between numbers. Ellis instinctively leaned in, not at the boy, but at the object. "Old habit. Can you fix this?" the boy asked. His voice was clear but quiet, like he hadn't spoken in a while. "It doesn't tick anymore." Ellis opened the door wider. The boy didn't move until Ellis stepped aside. Then he walked in without hesitation, like he'd already decided this was the right place long before he arrived. He said nothing else, just stood in the middle of the room surrounded by clocks, all telling the wrong time. Ellis gestured to the stool by the counter. "Sit," the boy obeyed. Gently he placed the broken watch on the felt mat. Ellis took it without asking questions. He turned it over in his hand, adjusted his loupe and examined the damage. The glass was chipped, the crown bent, and the hands stuck in an awkward 2:30 position. Inside, something had rattled loose. "You drop it?" Ellis asked. The boy looked at the floor. "No, it just stopped." "Belonged to someone? My dad?" Ellis paused. "He gave it to me," the boy added, "before he left." He didn't say more, and Ellis didn't press. He turned the watch toward the light and began inspecting it more closely. The back casing had initials, MJ, engraved with a shaky hand, along with a line in cursive too faint to read. Ellis reached for a brush and began cleaning the face gently, removing flecks of dirt and whatever time had buried there. "Name?" Ellis asked, not looking up. "Milo." "Milo what?" "Milo James." Ellis nodded once, mostly to himself. He pulled a notebook from under the counter, flipped to a clean page and wrote the name. Milo James, 3:12 a.m., watch repair. Milo watched silently. His eyes scanned the room, stopping briefly on the silver watch near the kitchen. It was the only one ticking steadily. Milo stared at it longer than anything else. "That one's not broken," he said. "No, it isn't." "Why?" "Because I never stopped winding it." Milo seemed to consider that. He didn't ask more. Ellis stood and walked to the small stove in the back. He turned the knob, clicked the igniter, and set a kettle on to boil. The room filled with a soft hiss. He moved without speaking, grabbing 2 mugs, one chipped, and a box of cocoa mix from the cabinet. When he handed Milo the steaming cup, the boy cupped it with both hands like it weighed something important. "Is it okay if I stay here a little while?" he asked after a few sips. "Just until the watch works again?" Ellis looked at him. The kid didn't beg. He didn't plead. He asked like someone used to being turned down. "You can stay until sunrise," Ellis said. Milo nodded, shoulders relaxing just enough for Ellis to notice. Then he yawned wide and honest, and leaned forward slightly over the counter. By the time the clocks chimed 4, he was asleep, head resting next to the broken watch. Ellis didn't move him. He just adjusted the silver lamp to cast a softer light, then picked up the pocket watch again. The hands still hadn't moved, but for some reason Ellis wound it anyway. The next afternoon, Ellis opened the shop early. He didn't expect the boy to come back. Most kids don't. Most people don't once they realize this place smells like dust and patience. But at 4:17 p.m., the bell above the door jingled softly. Milo stood there again. Same coat, same silence. This time, he held nothing in his hands. Just looked at Ellis like they had unfinished business. "You're early," Ellis said, not bothering to hide the surprise in his voice. Milo stepped inside. He didn't answer, didn't ask for cocoa. Just walked to the stool at the counter and climbed up without invitation. Ellis slid a cloth over the tools and moved the broken watch to the side. "Didn't think I'd see you again." Milo pulled a notebook from his pocket, worn and spiral-bound, the kind with bent corners and faint graphite smudges along the edges. He flipped through several pages before settling on one, a drawing, hand-drawn, careful. It was a clock, but not like any Ellis had seen. The face was wide and tilted slightly, shaped more like a sundial than a traditional watch. But what caught Ellis's eye was what sat above it, a tiny turbine. 3 slender blades connected to a housing that fed into the gears below. Beneath the sketch, written in all caps, "Wind-powered clock. Time by weather." Ellis leaned closer. "You draw this?" Milo nodded, not lifting his gaze. "Why wind? The—" Boy hesitated, then said, "Because you can't see it, but it's always there, like time." Ellis stared at him for a moment, unsure how to respond. There was no trace of pride in the boy's voice, no bravado. Just a quiet certainty, like he'd thought it through and accepted it. "You try building it?" "Don't have the pieces." Ellis walked to a cabinet in the corner and pulled out a shallow wooden tray. It was filled with spare parts, gears, hands, coils, screws, pulleys, some new, some older than either of them. He placed it on the counter. Between them. "Pick what you need," Milo blinked. "You serious?" "I don't draw for fun," Ellis said, "and you don't either." They worked in silence. Ellis tinkered with the broken pocket watch, adjusting its beat, cleaning debris from its heart, while Milo arranged parts on the notebook, building the design outward from the page. He wasn't fast, but he was sure. Each placement mattered. Every piece had a reason. Outside, the sun dropped lower behind the hills, turning the dusty windows amber. The shop warmed with color, golden light catching on brass and glass like the inside of a giant ticking jewelry box. The room filled with clicks and scrapes, but no voices. Not yet. When the bell rang again, Ellis didn't look up. Milo did. At the door stood Jenna, still in scrubs, hair pulled back. Her eyes scanned the shop, took in the boy, the man, the watch parts. She stepped inside slowly, like the floor might crack under her. "Milo," she said. Milo didn't move. He looked at her, then at Ellis, then down at his drawing. "I'm not staying," he said, as if that explained everything. "I just wanted to finish something." Jenna's jaw worked, but she didn't argue. She turned to Ellis. "You the one keeping him?" Ellis didn't flinch. "He showed up with a broken watch." "That's not what I asked." Ellis nodded toward the sketch. "He's fixing something. I'm just making sure the light's good." Jenna looked at her son again. Then, without saying more, she walked out. The bell above the door gave one sharp ring, then silence. Milo's pencil resumed moving, shading one blade of the windmill. Ellis didn't speak either. He knew better. Some things fix themselves when left alone long enough. Milo returned the next day just after lunch. He didn't knock, didn't ask, just walked in like he always had a key. Ellis looked up from the back table, nodded once, then went back to work. No questions, no welcome, none needed. The shop was quieter than usual. Most of the clocks had stopped overnight, not from neglect, just the way they did sometimes, like they were waiting for something worth counting again. Milo climbed onto the stool and opened his notebook. The wind-powered clock sketch was still there, now with a dozen small annotations in pencil, gear ratios, screw sizes, arrowed diagrams pointing to nowhere. He spread out the tray of parts Ellis had given him and began sorting, left to right, big to small, brass to copper. He worked with care but not obsession, like he knew what he wanted, even if it wasn't all there yet. Ellis adjusted the focus on his loop, hunched over the pocket watch again. The back casing was finally sealed, the movement no longer stuttered. He was down to polishing, the delicate part, the part people never see but always feel. Minutes passed, maybe more. Then Milo broke the silence, not with words but by humming, softly, off-key, a tune without a name. Just a handful of notes looping. Ellis didn't look up, but his ears caught it, and his fingers slowed. He reached for a cloth, wiped down the glass cover of the watch, then paused. The humming continued. "You do that when you work?" Ellis asked, tone casual. Milo shrugged. "My dad used to. He a clockmaker too." Milo shook his head. "Mechanic, but he fixed things like they were alive. Even lawn mowers got names." Ellis smiled faintly. "Let me guess. You were the assistant." "Only when I wasn't breaking stuff." They shared a brief silence that felt different than before, not awkward, just full. Like a room with company, not just noise. Ellis stood, walked over to a cabinet behind the counter and rummaged through a lower drawer. He pulled out a small box and placed it on the table beside Milo. "What's this?" "Motors. Tiny ones. Left over from a music box project no one ever picked up." Milo opened the box like it might contain treasure. He didn't say thank you, but his eyes softened. Ellis watched him test each motor, checking tension with his thumb, listening for the faint whir of something ready to move. When one buzzed to life, Milo grinned. "Not wide, just enough." "You know," Ellis said, "people think clocks are about seconds and minutes, but they're really about rhythm. You lose that, and nothing ticks right." Milo didn't look up. "Like people," Ellis paused. "Yeah, like people." A gust of wind rattled the front window. Outside, dry leaves skipped across the pavement like paper boats in a storm. Inside, the silver pocket watch on the shelf by the kitchen door kept ticking, steady as ever. Milo glanced at it again. "You ever name that one?" Ellis tilted his head. "No. Should I?" "It's the only one that acts like it knows what it's doing." Ellis chuckled. Then maybe it deserves one. Milo tapped his pencil against the table. What about Ruth? Why Ruth? No reason. Just sounds like someone who doesn't mess around. Ellis nodded, pleased. Ruth it is. They returned to work. More time passed, faster now. Milo lined up gears. Ellis sorted through springs. Occasionally one would pass a tool to the other without asking. At some point, Milo's elbow knocked a tiny screw onto the floor. He bent to look for it, crawling on hands and knees. Ellis stopped him with a finger. Don't bother. He reached behind the leg of the workbench and retrieved a small magnet on a string, dropping it into Milo's hand. Milo lit up. Genius, Ellis grinned. I've had years to cheat. As the sun dipped low again, casting orange light across the wood floor, the air between them felt different, warmer, anchored. Two people, fixing things, not for money, not for deadlines, but because some things deserve to be whole again. Before leaving, Milo closed his notebook and looked up. Do you think wind remembers where it's been? Ellis answered without pause. No, but it remembers who stood still long enough to feel it. The door slammed harder than it needed to. Milo flinched. His hand jerked, nearly sending a gear skittering across the workbench. Jenna Marino stood just inside the threshold, her eyes sharp and scanning. Her scrubs were wrinkled, a jacket thrown on top, hair pulled back tight like she hadn't slept properly in days. She looked like someone halfway between a double shift and a breakdown. I've been calling you for an hour, she said. Voice low but tense. Milo didn't answer. Ellis looked up from his work, calm but not casual. He didn't stand. He just turned slightly in his chair to face her, arms resting loosely on his knees. He's safe, Ellis said. That's not the point, Jenna snapped. Milo shifted in his seat, but didn't get down. Jenna walked farther in, keeping her eyes on her son. You can't just disappear after school. This isn't... She stopped herself, took a breath. I told you before, she said, turning to Ellis this time. I don't like surprises. Ellis met her gaze. Steady, not defensive. He came in on his own. I didn't ask him to. You didn't send him away either. No. Jenna's hands twitched, then crossed over her chest. She looked like she wanted to say something more biting, but it caught in her throat. Instead, her eyes dropped to the table. She saw the watch first, shiny now, no longer broken. Then the open notebook with Milo's careful drawings and annotations. Then the small tray of tools neatly arranged, like someone had taught the boy where they belonged. All of it quiet, ordered, intentional. I get that he likes it here, Jenna said, softer now. But that doesn't make it okay. Milo finally spoke. We weren't doing anything bad. Jenna closed her eyes a moment. That's not the issue, baby. Ellis stood now, not suddenly, but with the weight of someone who knows when it's time to stop sitting. I'm not trying to step in, he said. I know what this looks like, but he's not breaking rules. He's building something. Jenna studied him. Not just his face, his posture, his voice, the distance he kept from her son. You have kids? She asked. No. Wife? No. What do you know about raising a boy then? Ellis didn't flinch. Probably nothing. But I know what it's like to be one, especially when you feel like you're already letting people down just by existing. The room went still. Milo looked up at his mother, waiting. Not to argue, just to be heard. Jenna took another breath, this one deeper, slower. She walked over to the table and placed a hand gently on Milo's shoulder. We need to go home, she said. Just 5 more minutes, Milo asked, not whining, just hoping. Jenna looked at Ellis again. He said nothing, left the decision entirely to her. She hesitated, then nodded, barely. 5, then we eat. No arguments. Milo beamed. Jenna turned to leave, her hand trailing briefly across the edge of the workbench. She paused, eyes lingering on the polished pocket watch. That was his dad's, she asked, not turning around. Yes, Ellis replied. He always wanted to fix things, but he never had the hands for it. Her voice caught slightly. Then she walked out, letting the door close softly behind her. Ellis looked over at Milo. You've got 5. Milo grinned, already pulling the sketchbook open again. Outside, through the dusty window, Jenna stood by her car, watching. Not angry, just trying to breathe. Inside, the shop ticked quietly, like it knew not to interrupt. The hospital hallway smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. Jenna moved quickly, clipboard tucked tight against her chest, eyes focused, mouth drawn into a line. Her name tag swung slightly with each step. J. Moreno, RN. She didn't notice the soft crying from room 412, or the family arguing at the nurse's station. She was good at tuning things out now. It was part of surviving. In the break room, she poured stale coffee into a paper cup and stood by the window. She didn't drink it, just held it. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. Another buzz, then a third. She finally pulled it out. Missed call. Milo's school voicemail one knew. She stared at the screen, didn't tap play. Instead, she slid the phone back in her scrub pocket and kept standing there. The window overlooked the parking garage. Nothing. Green, nothing moving. Just layers of concrete and headlights coming on before sunset. Someone entered behind her. A fellow nurse. Becca, maybe. Jenna couldn't remember names the way she used to. "You good?" the woman asked. Jenna nodded. Without looking. "Weren't you off an hour ago?" "I picked up an extra half." Becca hesitated, then left her alone. Jenna finally sipped the coffee. It was cold. That night, at home, Milo sat at the kitchen table, arms folded, eyes fixed on the plate of reheated pasta. His backpack was still zipped. Jenna dropped her keys on the counter and opened the fridge without speaking. She took out a yogurt, peeled the lid, threw the foil in the sink instead of the trash. "You didn't check your voicemail," Milo said. Jenna paused. "Something happened at school today," he added. She leaned against the counter. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Then I'm sure it can wait." Milo didn't answer. Just picked at the cold spaghetti. Jenna watched him. He was getting taller. She hadn't noticed until recently that his sleeves were always a little too short. "You know I'm trying," she said. Not accusing, just stating. "Okay," Milo replied, but not like he believed her. Later that night, Jenna sat on the couch with the lights off. She scrolled through old photos on her phone, pictures she never looked at anymore. Milo as a baby, asleep on his father's chest. A blurry Christmas morning, a beach trip with towels flapping like flags. One photo caught her, a selfie. Milo, maybe 4, leaning against her shoulder, both of them sunburned, both smiling, genuinely. Back when smiles happened by accident, she hadn't taken a photo like that in years. At work the next morning, a patient coded on the table. Jenna moved on autopilot. Compressions, vitals, commands. She didn't falter. She never did in emergencies, but when it was over and the curtain closed around the bed, she found herself staring at her gloved hands. They were shaking slightly, not from fear, from exhaustion. She sat down on a metal stool and tried to breathe. Slowly. In, out, in, out. It didn't help. In the staff locker room, she finally played the voicemail, a teacher's voice, firm but kind. "Hi, Ms. Moreno. We noticed Milo was very quiet during lunch today, and he didn't want to go outside. He said something about needing to find a watch. He wouldn't explain. More. We just thought you should know." Jenna held the phone in her lap. The message ended. She sat there in her scrubs, in a room that smelled like plastic and stress, and let the silence stretch. Back in the present, Jenna leaned against the hood of her car, parked outside the watch shop. She could hear the muffled clinks of tools from inside, could picture Milo's small hands moving over gears, could see Ellis watching him, not correcting, just witnessing. She crossed her arms, then uncrossed them, pulled out her phone, tapped. The screen, there were no new voicemails, but this time she listened anyway, to nothing, too quiet. And maybe, for the first time in a while, that was enough. The next Saturday, Milo was back at the door, this time in daylight. He hesitated before knocking, but he didn't have to. Ellis opened it before his fist touched the wood. "You're..." "Hurley," Ellis said. "I didn't want to miss anything." Ellis stepped aside and Milo walked in like he belonged. A beat later, Jenna appeared at the edge of the porch. She didn't come in. She stayed standing on the steps, arms folded. eyes steady. Ellis gave her a small nod. "Coffee's strong today." She smirked but didn't smile. "He can stay for 2 hours." Ellis looked at Milo. "That enough time to build the future?" "Should be," Milo replied. Jenna walked off toward her car. She didn't look back, but Ellis noticed. She didn't drive away either, just sat behind the wheel, hands in her lap. Inside, the shop was cooler than usual. The afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the rows of clocks. Most of them had stopped again, but neither of them seemed to. Kurt and Ellis went to a drawer and pulled out a small black case. He placed it on the table in front of Milo and opened it with a soft click. Inside, nestled in worn velvet, was a tiny screwdriver set. Vintage, each handle marked with a colored ring, 4 size. They looked delicate but well used, like they'd been passed down through quiet generations. "Yours for the day," Ellis said. Milo's fingers hovered over them. "Really? I started with those when I was your age. Couldn't afford new. Ones still don't like 'em." Milo picked one up carefully, like it might break or vanish if he wasn't gentle. He turned it in his hand, feeling the weight. "People think fixing stuff is about hands," Ellis said, settling into his chair. "It's not. It's about listening." "To what?" "To when something used to work. That sound. It's still in there somewhere." They got to work. Milo returned to his notebook, sketching a new version of his wind-powered clock. This one was smaller, more compact, like he was imagining it could fit in someone's pocket. Ellis watched him out of the corner of his eye, then slid over a brass gear the size of a penny. "Try this." From a travel alarm, I never finished. Milo placed it carefully into his drawing. The workshop filled with the small, familiar sounds of construction, scraping, turning, adjusting. Once a tool dropped and Ellis flinched. "Sorry," Milo said. Ellis waved it off. "Tools fall. People do too. Doesn't mean they stop working." They kept going. At one point, Ellis pulled out a box of discarded parts. "Pick 5 things you don't recognize," he said. "I'll tell you what they used to be." Milo rummaged with both curiosity and care. He picked a gear with missing teeth, a spring coil bent at one end, a cracked faceplate, a hollow crown, and a shard of glass still etched with numbers. Ellis explained each one, not with technical terms but with stories. Who brought it in, what it was supposed to be, why it was never claimed. "It's like a museum," Milo said. Ellis shook his head. "Museums are for things that stopped moving. This place, this is where you wait to start again." Milo sat back. He looked around, really looked, for the first time maybe. Not just at the clocks, but at the shelves, the ceiling, the old fan that never turned but always hummed when it was quiet. "I think I like it here," he said. Ellis didn't say anything, just handed him a cloth and pointed to a dusty dial on the bench. "Good, then you can help clean." Milo grinned and got to work. Outside, Jenna looked up from the steering wheel. Through the dusty glass, she could just make out her son, elbows deep in tools, eyes sharp with purpose. Her hands relaxed on her lap. For once, she didn't feel like checking the time. The pizza was cold by the time they got around to it. Jenna sat at the small square table in the back of the shop, wedged between a wall of old cabinets and a shelf stacked with clock manuals. She balanced a paper plate on her lap, while Milo tore into a second slice like he hadn't eaten in days. Ellis sat across from them, using a bent fork to poke at a salad he hadn't asked for. The shop lights were dimmer in the back, softer. One bulb flickered overhead, but nobody seemed to mind. Jenna studied her son between bites. He was talking, really talking. Not just one-word answers, full sentences, questions, descriptions. He told Ellis about the hamster his class was trying to name, how the gym teacher wore mismatched socks, and how the school's fire alarm once went off during a spelling test, which he secretly hoped would happen again. She hadn't heard him sound this alive in months, maybe longer. Ellis didn't interrupt. He didn't even seem surprised. He just listened, nodded, asked the occasional question, letting the boy's energy stretch out without crowding it. At one point, Milo laughed so hard at his own story that a piece of crust flew from his mouth, onto the floor. Jenna's instinct was to scold him, but Ellis just passed him a napkin and said, "Accurate trajectory, you've got natural aim." Milo giggled, wiped his mouth, kept going. Jenna leaned back slightly in her chair, unsure what to do with this version of her child, one that didn't seem to need protecting or pushing. Just space. Ellis finally set down his fork and reached toward the side shelf. He pulled down a familiar object and placed it gently in the center of the table, the silver pocket watch. Its surface gleamed under the low light, newly polished. The second hand moved in a smooth, confident sweep. Milo reached out but didn't touch it. His eyes followed, the ticking hand like it was drawing something only he could see. Jenna stared at the watch, her voice quiet. "You fixed it," Ellis nodded. "Didn't need much, just a little patience." She looked at him. "How long had it been dead?" Ellis shrugged. "Long enough to make someone give up, but not long enough to make it impossible." Milo whispered. "It sounds like breathing." Ellis smiled. "It's the only one in the shop that runs on time," he said, looking at the watch. "I wind it every day, but I never set it. I just let it find its rhythm again." Jenna tilted her head. "Why?" He looked at her then, not evasively, but like someone weighing how much truth to give away. "My dad ran this place for 30 years. After he passed, I left it untouched. I thought, if I didn't move anything, maybe time would stay still. Like I could keep the grief in one corner of the room." He ran a thumb over the edge of the watch. "But that one," he continued, "just kept ticking, even when everything else stopped. I didn't know if it was broken or just stubborn." Milo said softly, "Or maybe it was waiting." Ellis nodded once. "Maybe." Jenna didn't speak. She looked at Ellis, at her son, then back to the watch. There was something gentle about the way it filled the silence, like a third voice neither of them had to own. Outside, dusk crept over the town. The windows dimmed, shadows settled into the corners. Inside, the table grew quieter. Milo leaned on his elbow and traced circles on his plate with a crust. "Do you ever wish you could fix people like you fix clocks?" Ellis looked at him. "No," he said, "but I think people aren't broken, just out of sync sometimes. Doesn't mean they can't keep going." Jenna swallowed something in her throat. "You really believe that?" Ellis met her eyes. "I have to." The pocket watch ticked between them, soft and steady. Jenna looked at her son again. His shoulders were relaxed, his fingers idle, his eyes calm. She hadn't seen him this still since before his father left. Ellis stood, collecting plates. "Dessert's just butterscotch candies in a drawer somewhere. We're not fancy around here." Milo grinned. "Can I have 2? "You? Kidding?" Ellis tossed him one midair. "Have 3, you earned 'em." Jenna shook her head, smiling despite herself. As Ellis walked to the sink, the silver watch ticked on. It didn't need applause. It didn't care who listened. But for the first time in a long time, they all did. It was a Thursday afternoon when the news came. Outside, the sky had turned an unsteady grey, as if the town itself couldn't decide between rain or sun. Inside the shop, the rhythm was familiar, the smell of metal and polish, the soft click of tools, Milo's pencil scratching on paper, Ellis humming under his breath without realizing. Jenna stood near the door. She hadn't come in fully, just hovered between the outside world and whatever strange safety the workshop had become. Her hands were in the pockets of her coat, shoulders tight. She waited until Ellis looked up. "We got the apartment," she said. Ellis blinked. "Apartment?" "In Durango. My aunt found us a place near her. Same district. New start." He nodded slowly, set his screwdriver down. "When?" "Week. After next. I already gave my notice at the hospital." Milo didn't say anything. He sat on the stool beside the workbench, holding a small gear in his fingers like it might slip through if he moved too fast. Jenna glanced at her son. "It's a good opportunity. Smaller classes, more support." Ellis forced a smile. "Sounds like the smart move." She didn't answer. Silence settled. Milo still hadn't looked up. His fingers stopped turning the gear. He placed it gently on the bench and closed his sketchbook without a sound. Ellis leaned against the counter. "Are you okay, kid?" Milo's voice came soft. "You'll keep the watch ticking?" Ellis nodded. "Always." The boy nodded too, but it wasn't agreement. It was resignation. Jenna moved closer, kneeling by her son. "It's not forever. You'll Make new friends and we can still call Ellis, right? Milo shrugged. Jenna sighed, her voice strained. I'm trying to do what's best. Ellis watched her. Watched the way her fingers hovered near her son's knee but didn't touch. The way her voice hardened when she talked about leaving, like she needed to convince herself more than the boy. He stepped in gently. Milo would... "Say you help me with something out back?" Milo nodded slowly and followed. The back room was cooler, quieter. A single window let in the grey light, casting long shadows across shelves of broken clocks that hadn't ticked in years. Ellis sat on an old stool. Milo stood beside him. "You know," Ellis said, "I lived in 5 different houses before. I turned 18. Every time we moved, I thought I'd lose whatever good came before." Milo didn't say anything, but I didn't. The good stuff sticks, even when it hurts. He reached over to a small cabinet, pulled out a narrow wooden box and opened it. Inside was a collection of blank clock faces, just circles of ivory and brass untouched by time. He took one out and handed it to Milo. "This one's for you. You can mark it however you want. Doesn't have to show the right time. Just what matters." Milo turned it in his hands. "Can I draw on it?" "Better, you can build on it." The boy held it tightly like a secret. Jenna's voice called from the other room. "Milo, we've got to get going." Ellis and Milo stepped back into the main shop. Jenna stood by the door, keys in hand, eyes softer now. She looked at Ellis. Not avoiding him this time. "Thanks," she said. "For what?" "For giving him back some light." Ellis didn't answer. Just nodded. Milo crossed the room and stood by the door, then turned back. "Can I come by before we leave?" "Any time," Ellis said. "The door's never really locked." Milo looked at the silver pocket watch on the shelf. It ticked, steady, as always. Then he stepped outside with his mother, the bell over the door giving a single soft ring behind them. Ellis watched the space they left behind. He didn't move. Didn't wind the clocks, didn't reach for tools. He just stood there alone again, but not untouched. The call came just after 9. Jenna's voice on the other end was tight, clipped, trying not to sound panicked, but failing. "He's gone," she said. "I turned my back for 5 minutes. His backpack's here, but he's not." Ellis was already reaching for his coat. The town was small, but at night it stretched out like a maze. Side streets led nowhere. Shadows pooled behind closed shops. Porch lights blinked on one by one as word passed from house to house. Milo's missing. Jenna circled the school twice, the playground, the small library near Main. Each time her voice grew thinner, more desperate, more guilt-laced. "He wouldn't just run off," she kept repeating. "He's not that kind of kid." Ellis didn't say much. He checked the usual places, then the unusual ones, the bus stop, the hardware store steps, even the empty train tracks behind the diner. Still nothing. Then, as he turned onto his own block, he saw it. The light in the shop window was on. He hadn't left it that way inside. The bell didn't jingle. It was wedged open, as if someone didn't want to make a sound. Ellis stepped quietly through the doorway. The shop was still. No ticking, no tools scattered, no voices. Just Milo, sitting cross-legged on the wooden floor, the silver pocket watch, cradled in his hands like it might slip away if he breathed too hard. He wasn't crying, he wasn't moving, just listening. Ellis knelt down beside him. "You scared your mum?" Milo nodded. "You scared me." Another nod. "I had to come back," Milo said. "I wasn't finished." He held out the watch. It was ticking, soft, steady. "I wound it," he whispered. "Just like you said. Not too tight." Ellis examined it gently. "Looks good." Milo's fingers closed around it again. "My dad gave it to me the day before he left," he said. "Said it was his father's. I didn't know what to do with it then. I thought it would tell me when he'd come back." Ellis sat beside him cross-legged now. "When did you realize it wouldn't?" Milo looked up for the first time. "When I brought it here. And you didn't fix it right away. You just listened." Ellis nodded slowly. "Most things don't need fixing, just someone to believe they're still worth the time." Milo blinked hard. His voice barely rose above the stillness. "Did your dad leave too?" Ellis looked down at his hands. Not by choice. Milo tilted his head. Mine did. A long silence filled the shop, one not heavy with sadness but weighted with truth. Two people, different losses, same ache. Milo reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. The edges were worn, the ink faded. He handed it to Ellis. It was in the watch. Ellis unfolded it carefully. Inside, scribbled, in blocky handwriting, were just 4 words. Keep time for him. Beneath it, a child's drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands, one big, one small. A clock above them. Ellis ran his thumb over the drawing. Did your dad write this? Milo shrugged. I think so. Maybe my mum helped. I don't remember. Ellis folded the note back, slowly. You kept this all this time? I didn't know it was there. Not until you fixed the watch. Ellis looked at him, really looked. You know, time's not just about what's lost, he said. It's about what we choose to carry forward. Milo clutched the watch tighter. Can I sleep here tonight? Ellis raised an eyebrow. Milo added quickly, just for a little, I don't want to go home yet. Ellis stood and walked to the back room. He came back with an old wool blanket and a cushion pulled from a dusty chair. He set them gently beside the boy. Milo curled up without a word. The watch pressed to his chest. Ellis sat nearby, not watching, not hovering, just present. After a while, Milo's breathing slowed. The kind of breathing that meant real sleep, deep, unafraid. Ellis leaned back in his chair and listened to the tick of the silver watch. Still steady, still alive. He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was keeping time for someone else. He was finally sharing it. The morning was quiet, soft with the kind of light that only came after a night of worry. Jenna's car pulled up to the curb fast, tires crunching gravel. She barely parked before the door flew open, and she stepped out, half running across the sidewalk. She didn't even knock. Milo! Her voice was tight, tired, cracking at the edges. Ellis... Before she could finish, Milo appeared in the doorway. He looked small in the oversized flannel Ellis had draped over him, the sleeves rolled 3 times. His hair was a mess, his eyes red but clear. Jenna dropped to her knees and pulled him close. You scared me, she whispered. You can't do that, baby, ever. I'm sorry, Milo murmured into her shoulder. I didn't mean to, I just needed to finish something. Jenna nodded, still holding him. Ellis stood a few feet back, arms crossed loosely. He didn't interrupt. When they finally pulled apart, Jenna looked up at Ellis. Her eyes softened, not suspicious this time, not guarded, just grateful. Thank you, she said quietly, for finding him. For everything. Ellis nodded once. He found himself. I just left the light on. She let out a shaky breath. I thought I was losing him, little by little. Ellis didn't reply. He just walked behind the counter, opened a shallow drawer, and pulled out a sheet of stiff paper. He returned to them and handed it to Milo. The sketch, but not just any sketch. The wind-powered clock, redrawn in ink with clean lines, measured dimensions, and small notes in Ellis's neat handwriting filling the margins. At the bottom, 2 signatures, Milo James in pencil, and below, it in pen, E-Dade, apprentice mentor. Milo's eyes widened. You finished it? Ellis shook his head. You finished it, I just gave it a name. Jenna leaned in, studying the drawing. It's beautiful. Milo turned to her, hopeful. Can I still build it? Even if we move? She hesitated, then looked to Ellis. He said, Distance doesn't stop hands from turning. You've got the design and you've got time. Jenna smiled, tired but real. I guess we'll need to find a good hardware store in Durango. Milo's grin came slow but sure. Jenna looked around the shop one last time. The mismatched clocks, the dust motes dancing in the beam of sunlight through the window, the steady tick of the silver watch behind the counter. She looked back at Ellis? I thought this place was frozen in time, she said. Turns out it's where things start moving again. Ellis didn't answer. He just gave her a small, respectful nod. They turned to go. Milo waved once more, then paused. Hey, Ellis, yeah, I think I'll name it Ruth too. Ellis raised an eyebrow. Why? Because the first one never gave up and this one won't either. Ellis smiled. Sounds just right. The shop was quiet again. Milo had gone to the diner across the street for pancakes with Jenna's sister, who'd driven in from Durango to help with the packing. Jenna stayed behind, half because Milo asked, half because she hadn't found the right words to say goodbye yet. She stood near the counter, fingers brushing over the edge of the workbench. Her gaze drifted from one clock to another, never resting, long. Most had stopped ticking again, as if they knew time didn't always help. Ellis stood by the shelf where the silver pocket watch rested in its cradle. He adjusted its angle slightly, like always. "You don't talk much," Jenna said. "Never saw the point of filling air with words if you've got nothing worth adding." She gave a soft, dry laugh. "Wish I'd learned that sooner." A pause, then gently. "Can I ask you something?" Ellis turned to her. "Go ahead. When Milo started coming here, did he talk about me?" Ellis didn't answer right away. "Not in words." She looked away. "That's what I figured." He studied her, shoulders drawn in, arms crossed, not out of cold, but caution. Like someone used to holding back more than giving away. "I don't blame him," she said. "I didn't know what I was doing, still don't." Ellis leaned on the counter, quiet, listening. Jenna took a slow breath. "After his dad left, I tried to hold everything together. Bills, work, school forms, groceries, and all of it. And I thought if I just kept moving, if I kept him safe, that was enough. But he needed something else." Ellis nodded. "Presence." "Yeah." Her voice lowered. "I was scared. Still am. Not of losing him, of needing him, of opening up to him and not knowing how to make it stick. I guess I'm scared that if I try to connect and fail, it'll hurt more than just keeping distance." Ellis didn't interrupt. She looked at him, eyes shining but no tears. "I know it sounds selfish." "No," he said calmly. "It sounds honest." Jenna swallowed. "You ever feel that way?" Ellis didn't speak. Instead, he reached under the counter and pulled out a small box. He placed it between them and slid it across. Inside was a wind-up music box. Old, scratched, beautiful in its way. The kind that didn't play loud or long, but just enough to fill a room with something soft and fragile. He turned the key on the side. It began to play, slow and uneven, like it had forgotten the full melody, but remembered the feeling. Jenna listened, still. Ellis spoke quietly, over the tune. "My dad gave this to my mum their first year of marriage. She played it every night after he died. Said the sound reminded her that something always returned, even if it changed." Jenna said nothing. Ellis closed the box gently. "I never liked talking about it, still don't. But I figure, if you're brave enough to say what you just said, I can do this much." Jenna looked at him, not like a nurse or a mother or a woman trying to keep everything from falling apart. She looked like someone who hadn't had a moment of quiet understanding in years. She stepped forward. Just one step. "That clock you fixed," she said softly. "He's going to keep it forever." Ellis smiled, small but true. "That's the point." She hesitated, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded note, creased and smudged. She handed it to him. "I found this in Milo's backpack. I think he meant to leave it here." Ellis unfolded the paper. It was written in Milo's messy pencil scrawl. "Thanks for not making me talk all the time. I still hear the wind when I'm not here. I think that means something." Ellis refolded it carefully. Neither of them spoke. Outside, a breeze picked up. The wind chimes over the door let out a faint, brittle song. Jenna looked toward the window, then back at him. "We leave Monday," he nodded. "Can we stop by one more time before we go?" Ellis gave her the same answer he'd given Milo. The doors never really locked. The morning came quietly. No bell above the door, no small feet running across the shop floor. No voice asking for the red screwdriver instead of the flathead. Just light, gentle and golden, stretching across the wood like a memory returning in pieces. Ellis moved through the shop slower than usual, though he wouldn't admit it. He boiled water for coffee, set 2 mismatched mugs on the counter by habit. Only one got used. The clocks were still, every single one. He didn't wind them, not yet. When he passed the workbench, he noticed something that hadn't been there the night before, a folded piece of paper, a small pinwheel made from notebook scraps, both sitting where Milo usually sat. Ellis paused. He picked up the paper first. It wasn't an envelope, not sealed, just folded once with care. Inside was Milo's final sketch, the wind-powered clock, version 5. This one smaller, cleaner, more refined. The lines darker, the angles tighter. It had no notes, just one sentence scrawled neatly beneath it in all caps. Sometimes you don't need to stay to keep something moving. No signature, no goodbye, just that. Ellis let out a slow breath. Then he picked up the pinwheel. It was made from an old page in Milo's sketchbook, torn gently, folded with precision. The blades were even. The pin through the center was one Ellis recognized, taken from the parts drawer near the back, one he hadn't used in years. He turned it gently. It spun, quietly, like it didn't need wind, just time. Ellis held it in his hand for a long while, then set it gently on the shelf next to the silver pocket watch. He didn't need a note to understand what it meant. The boy had been here, said what he needed to, left something behind, not as an ending, but as a pulse, a small turning proof that what had happened in this shop, the hours shared, the quiet work, the trust built in silence, had found its rhythm. And now it was carrying forward, even if they weren't in the same room anymore. Ellis stood for a long moment, listening to the quiet. Then finally, he reached behind the counter, took down the key, and wound the first clock. The sun was lowering. Now, late afternoon light pouring long and golden across the shop floor. Dust danced in it like small secrets. Ellis stood by the front window, polishing the glass with slow, absent strokes, more for rhythm than purpose. He wasn't expecting anyone, not anymore. So when the bell above the door chimed softly, he didn't turn right away. "Shop's still open," he called over his shoulder. Then he heard it, footsteps, 2 sets. He turned. Jenna stood there in the doorway, holding a paper bag in one hand and car keys in the other. Milo was beside her, a little more sun on his face, a little more sure on his feet. They didn't speak. Ellis nodded once. "Didn't think I'd see you again." Jenna stepped inside, looking around like it was the first time, like she wasn't just visiting, but really seeing the place. The clocks, the dust, the warmth. Milo set his backpack down and walked straight to the workbench, not rushing, not asking, just like he never left. Jenna followed slowly, placing the paper bag on the counter. "We didn't go." Ellis raised an eyebrow. "We were on the highway for 20 minutes, she said. Then I pulled over. Milo wasn't saying anything, but he didn't have to." Milo looked up and nodded. It felt wrong. Ellis kept his voice even. "Durango's a good place." Jenna smiled, faint and wry. "Probably, but it's not our place. At least, not yet." Silence passed through them like a quiet agreement. She continued, softer now. "I don't know if staying is the right call. I'm still scared, still tired, still don't have a perfect plan." "Good," Ellis said. Jenna blinked. "Good?" "Plans get in the way. People don't live by blueprints." She let out a breath somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. Milo unzipped his backpack and pulled out something wrapped in a dish towel. He placed it carefully on the table, then unwrapped it. The brass frame of the wind-powered clock. Unfinished, imperfect, beautiful. "I brought it with me," he said. Didn't want to leave it in a box. Ellis stepped closer. He ran a finger along the edge of the housing. "You sanded this?" Milo nodded. "Took all night." Jenna leaned in too, eyes scanning the rough work. The uneven joins, the tiny pencil marks still visible under the varnish. "It's not perfect," Milo said, bracing. Ellis shook his head. "That's not the point." He looked at the boy, then at Jenna. "You stayed. That's the part that matters." Milo smiled. Jenna sat down slowly in the old armchair near the counter, the one no customer ever used. She looked around the shop, the walls, the shelves, the ticking slowly returning now that Ellis had wound a few of the clocks earlier that morning. It didn't feel like a place for the past anymore. It felt like a place where people could try again. "Is it okay if we just stay a while?" she asked. Ellis glanced toward the back, then back at her. "I've got an extra plate," he said, "and some butterscotch in the drawer." Milo perked up. "3 pieces?" Ellis smirked. That's standard. Jenna shook her head, smiling. Not wide, but real. Milo climbed onto his stool. Jenna settled deeper into the armchair. Ellis returned to the workbench. No one said much. No one needed to. Outside, the wind picked up gently. The pinwheel in the window, Milo's paper one, turned slowly, quietly, like it had all the time in the world. Inside, three people who had once been lost in their own separate silences now shared one, and somehow it didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning. It started small. A toothbrush in the bathroom Ellis never used, a cereal box on the kitchen shelf that wasn't his. A laugh echoing down the hall early in the morning, still half asleep, still full of life. Before Ellis could mark the moment, it had already happened. They were living there, together, not with ceremony, not with contracts or long talks, just with quiet decisions, day by day. Jenna took the guest room in the back, the one that used to hold old shelving and unopened crates. Milo chose the loft above the shop, where the light came in crooked and the dust glowed like tiny stars when he moved too fast. They made it work. Jenna worked half days at the clinic nearby. In the afternoons, she'd come back, change into a soft sweatshirt and read on the front step with a cup of tea. Some evenings, she'd hum to herself in the kitchen, tunes Ellis didn't know but liked the sound of. Milo, though, he claimed the clocks. Every single one, he gave them names. The tall grandfather clock in the corner was Gertrude because it groaned when it started ticking again. The tiny cuckoo above the register was Frank, even though Ellis insisted it was Swiss and should have something more elegant. The one with the cracked glass? Charlie, because he looked like someone who tried too hard. There were names written in pencil under each clock now, just initials and a nickname, but Ellis didn't erase them. He found he liked looking up and seeing where life had slipped in. One Saturday morning, Milo came downstairs with a wrench in his back pocket and a half-eaten slice of toast in his hand. "Ruth is slow," he said, mouth full. Ellis looked up from his coffee. "Ruth?" "The pocket watch." "I think she's tired." Ellis stood and walked over, picked it up from its usual place beside the paper pinwheel. He listened. You're right." Milo grinned. "Told you." Jenna called from the kitchen. "Don't gloat, clock boy." Ellis handed Milo the tiny screwdriver set, his set. Not on loan anymore, just his. "You know what to do." Milo took it with careful hands and started working at the bench. Ellis watched him for a long moment, then turned to the shelf on the far wall, the one full of clocks he hadn't touched in years. Some were broken, others unfinished, most were forgotten. He walked over slowly, pulling one down. The brass was tarnished, the second hand long gone. He remembered who had brought it in, an old man with sad eyes and 2 missing buttons on his coat. Ellis had promised to fix it. He never had. He set it down on the other end of the bench. Milo looked up. "That one's got a good face." Ellis nodded. "Yeah. Think it's time I gave it another shot." From then on, it became a rhythm. Each week, Ellis pulled down another forgotten clock. Each day, Milo named one more that had returned to life, and slowly the shop changed. People started coming back, not in crowds, but in steady trickles. A woman who wanted her grandmother's mantel clock restored, a teen who brought in a busted wristwatch with a drawing of a cat inside, a teacher who remembered Ellis's father and asked if the old repairman still sat in the back. Ellis always smiled softly. "Not anymore. But I think he'd be proud." One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and threw gold across the counters, Ellis sat at the bench polishing the brass of a newly revived wall clock. Milo leaned on the edge of the table, chin resting on folded arms, watching. "Hey, Ellis," he said. "Yeah? Do clocks ever get lonely?" Ellis thought for a moment. "No. Not if they're still ticking." Milo looked at the row of named clocks, each one humming its own quiet beat, then nodded. "Good." Jenna passed behind them, placing a steaming mug beside Ellis without a word. She paused, watching the two of them work, hands moving in mirrored rhythms. She didn't say it aloud, but she felt it in her chest. This wasn't where they'd meant to end up, but maybe it was exactly where they were supposed to begin. The evening came soft and slow. It was the kind of quiet that asked nothing. No decisions, no repairs, no next steps. Just the hush of twilight seeping into corners, the amber glow of the shop windows spilling gently onto the sidewalk. Inside, the clocks ticked in their staggered rhythms, some fast, some behind, a few perfectly in sync. The air smelled faintly of oil and wood polish, with a hint of cinnamon from whatever Jenna had baked earlier. Ellis sat alone at the workbench, not working. His hands were still, his eyes distant. In front of him, the silver pocket watch lay open. Still ticking. He'd wound it earlier out of habit, and to his quiet surprise, it hadn't needed it. The hands moved smoothly. The sound was full, steady, like it had nothing left to prove. He watched it for a while, then reached up and slowly closed the cover with a soft click. He didn't place it back on its shelf. Instead, he slipped it into the top drawer of the bench and left it there, no ceremony, just a choice. Some things didn't need to be on display anymore. Some things had already said what they needed to say. Out front, the bell above the door jingled gently. Jenna entered, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She'd been in the kitchen again, something about experimenting with peach cobbler and burning. "Only half of it. Ready?" she asked. Ellis stood, brushing dust from his apron. "You think he's actually finished?" she smirked. "It's Milo. He started over 3 times just to align the font." They stepped outside together. The sky was dusky purple now, crickets beginning their nightly rhythm, street lamps humming. Milo stood on a wooden stepladder just beneath the shop's awning. He turned as they came out, eyes bright, cheeks a little smudged with paint. "Okay," he said, jumping down and stepping back. Together they looked up. The new sign hung just above the door, simple, hand-painted, and slightly off-center in the most human way possible. It read Time and Wind, Repairs and Invention by Dade and Son. Underneath the lettering, bolted gently into the frame, was a small wind-powered pinwheel, its blades made of brass, its center a salvaged gear from one of Ellis's forgotten clocks. Spun slowly in the evening breeze, not fast, not to impress, just steady. Ellis let out a slow breath. Jenna looked over. "Are you okay?" He nodded. "Yeah." Milo stepped between them, arms crossed proudly. "I think it's perfect." Ellis smiled. "You know it's crooked, right?" "Yeah." Milo grinned. "So it looks like us." Jenna laughed. "The kind that came from the stomach, easy and unguarded." They stood there for a while, the 3 of them, watching the sign move slightly in the wind. A few neighbors passed by, waved. The light from inside the shop spilled out onto the sidewalk, catching the gold edges of the pinwheel, making it glow. Ellis glanced toward the window. Inside, the clocks kept ticking, all of them, even the one that once refused to. He looked at Jenna, then at Milo, then back at the sign. There was no big moment, no final word, just a feeling. Something had settled. Something had begun. And above the door, the little wind clock spun. Not to measure time, but to carry it forward.